Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Veil background information. Today we've got another creature profile for you, and as continuing with the trend, it's the last part of the werewolf one, which is about the cursed and enchanted werewolf. Next time we'll be doing about the Strix, which should be quite interesting as well. Like for all the files I do, we'll start with a quote from one of my stories that has some link to the topic. Then we'll actually discuss the information I use in the background to help me develop the idea, or things linked to it, or just like a introduction to the mythology around the creature. And then I'll go on to information on how I've used it, or like a species profile. But as we covered that with the werewolves in general with the previous one, there might be a bit less on this one. Anyway, let's go. Just a cursed werewolf. See, there's different kinds of werewolves. There's cursed, Mara, charmed, shapeshifter, skinwalker, pedigree, and iron wolf. That's a quote from Tavis from I'll Be the Bee. Just a short quote there because it seemed to fit the big differences of the werewolves, though Mara, shapeshifter and skinwalker we'll talk about separately in the species category at some point. Today we're focusing mainly on cursed and enchanted werewolves. So what is a cursed or enchanted werewolf compared to the two previous we've talked about in the Veil? It's the fact that none of them were born with the ability to change, and all of them are at the greatest risk of murdering others. I'm going to split this part into two discussions, and that will be on where the cursed werewolf inspiration is from, and then about the enchanted. There won't be a species profile as such on this, as generally these two are humans that are forced to change into wolves and undergo a violently painful change and hunger for human flesh, or to hunt, and they often wake up not completely aware of what happened. The big difference in these beings is how long they're affected for and how they got the curse. I suggest the werewolf situation as a curse because in traditional folklore or in mythology, it is a curse placed upon an ordinary human, either to teach them a lesson or that happens by pure accident. Around the countries where wolves have existed, there are always werewolf stories, and during the witch trials through Europe, the trying people that were accused of turning into werewolves was also commonplace. The malevolence of the werewolf curse passes from punished by a god, like Zeus in the case of Lycaon. In Armenian folklore, women specifically being punished to be wolves for 7 years, to people actively becoming werewolves in pacts with the devil or through spells. As wide as the old range of the wolf are the variations, with some places including hyenas with the curse and zombie and blood-sucking capabilities to these wolves. The sources of each variation to werewolf interpretations are huge throughout the world, and yet they all cover a normal human going from the person you know to the monster you don't, almost as if they're the oldest story about being wary of strangers. In most cases in Northern Europe, the wolf and werewolf mythos is often looked to be heavily influenced by the Scandinavian mythology of the sun and moon being chased and devoured by the ravening wolf sons of Fenrir, to the wearing of wolf and bear skins by the berserk warriors, applied with drugs to make them fearless in battle. But arguably the werewolf and vampire folklore are predominantly from Slavic culture as seen in popular conceptions, and it is from these two regions that my enchanted and cursed come from. But firstly, I must tell you that werewolves were something I was utterly fascinated by within my youth. I never thought they were real, of course, but the concepts and the stories behind it, as well as the history, was always interesting. Thus, what kid who learns they can't turn into a T-Rex when they were 5 doesn't consider the possibility of becoming something like a wolf, only to realise you're stuck as a human? Haha. But when I was 12, my local library was selling some old books, and amongst them I found this story, which was a little storybook about a guy bitten and cursed to be a werewolf who eventually gets his arm cut off, but with snippets about werewolf lore around it. It was cheap and I was enthralled with it. By this point I had never watched any werewolf movie before, but realised it was the basic story of the movie Werewolves, which was a big influence here. But not long after, my beloved older sister took me to a shop in town that sold incense, those ambient CDs for meditation, tie-dye clothes and whatnot. It had a collection of tarot cards and some alternative books, including a collection of gothic books. I would later buy a copy of Wagner the Werewolf from this place, which if you want to read a good werewolf story with hints of Faust, read that. But I found the Book of the Werewolves by Sabine Baring-Gould, and I read it cover to cover even at school and was utterly drawn into it. The variety of stories collected and the information shared was something that changed my thoughts on what werewolves could be and included, and so it was the biggest source for my werewolf work. And if you ever want to write some werewolf stories, I would suggest this resource, as it is my favourite werewolf source, and from it that I created what we'll talk about first: enchanted werewolves. I talked previously about the wolf strap, or the wolf belt, and I'll explain it here. In some stories, there are ideas that a person can choose to become a werewolf through performing a spell, using a charmed object, or dressing as a wolf. The wolf strap is a belt made of wolf, in some cases skin, sinew, or potentially intestines, that is given powers by the devil to give the wearer the ability to turn into a wolf at will to kill their enemies or cause trouble, generally in purchase of their souls. These straps turn up in werewolf trial literature, and famously Peter Stubb, we've talked about him before, was said to have used one. In the Vale, this is one of the ways to forget the curse and become enchanted, with the belt being given in a deal with a demon, and the person to get involved in the deal will find that they are unable to remove the belt, and for 7 days straight and for 7 nights they will become a ravening wolf. The strap they will keep for life, and every 7 years become afflicted by it for 7 days until their death because of the deal. You'll note the mention of 7 days and 7 years linking into the Armenian folklore, that a woman performing sins would be turned for 7 years into a wolf until her better nature would let her revert back. Then 7 days stuck as a wolf is common amongst the enchanted werewolves in the Vale, and my initial inspiration for that comes from one of the Icelandic sagas, where a father and his son are in the woods hunting a wolf, and they come upon a place where they think to rest until they spot the skins of wolves hanging from the wall. Many skins. They choose to don them, but find themselves being turned into wolves for 7 whole days before they could get the skins off, only for the situation to spiral out of control when the son thinks using it to become a wolf is not such a bad thing, and the father eventually kills him in wolf form. I'm summarising that one because I can't remember it all completely, but it's in the Book of Werewolves, and I'm trying to be reasonably brief here. The 7-year aspect as well comes from Punishment 2 into folklore, with Natalis of Ulster apparently turning a prominent Irish family into wolves for 7 years. It seems 7 is a big aspect within werewolf mythology, and especially 7 days trapped in wolf form, leading often to the tragic fate of the wrongdoer being killed in wolf form. When I was searching up Lithuanian werewolf folklore too, there was also the curious idea of walking under a certain kind of tree, speaking a chant that would turn them into a werewolf for 7 nights, which was also incorporated in use for enchanted werewolves in the Vale. Indeed, there are chants and salves, hallucinogenic ones generally, that occur in werewolf lore to create the enchanted beings, and these exist within the Vale as the enchanted, along with wearing the hide of a werewolf that has been killed in its form. But also in the Vale there is the fact that when a werewolf is killed, it turns back into human form. To cure an enchanted werewolf with a salve in the Vale, though, they are simply taken to a coven to be given a cure by the witches. If to relieve a wolfskin transformation, they must find another with the same affliction, and under a winter moon shed the skins and burn each other's. This idea comes from the Serbian Bukodlak werewolf, spelled Bukodla. When it comes to the werewolves in the Vale that are known as true cursed and can come in from outside the Vale, these are the werewolves to conform to the Hollywood and fictional idea of the being becoming bitten, being cursed to turn under the moon, hunger for human flesh, and be defeated by silver. In the Vale, these are exactly the same as werewolves in other fiction that have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and where they should have been killed by the beast, somehow they were left alive but infected as if it were the rabies virus. However, in the Vale, the new and full moon can affect the shape-shifting, with them often turning for 7 days to time with the full moon, and with certain hormonal cycles such as menstruation in women afflicted by timing to the new moon. The concept of using silver to defeat these werewolves actually comes from journaling, with folklore suggesting the purity of silver, as well as a reference to a werewolf incident in Greifswald, where the town was supposedly infected. This idea was made big along with a real interest in the werewolf concept by the Beast of Shepherdan. I'm pretty sure anyone who's looked up werewolves has heard of this creature, but probably not that it's part of where the silver mythos comes from. The concept of the full moon is iconic in werewolf folklore as well, comes in fact from Balkan traditions, where winter solstice, Easter and full moons were noted as times of transformation in Hungarian mythology. Particularly, Hungarian folklore often holds werewolves and vampires as very similar and demonic in nature, though in my Vale stories they're exceptionally separate. Now, I know this is short and as mangled up as you might expect, but this is because, like with the vampire, it sometimes feels like everyone has enough similarities in their idea of the werewolf for everyone to sort of find nothing much unique to do with them. Why? Well, the story formula of a poor cursed person is too attractive, and for my story in the Vale, for a being to be turned into a flesh-hungry monster against their will and have no memory of it the next day exemplifies the duality present for my universe. The ignorant of the Vale and those born within it and aware. Hence I've not diverted from the werewolf folklore much at all, and tried to include its variety where I can in my stories. And why this section is reading more snippets of werewolf mythology and how I've used it, and not like the previous two creature profiles. But the reason I finish on this with werewolves is because for some iconic beings in paranormal romance, what is the point in changing them too much? Thank you. Bye.